I'm thinking of all the people on planet Earth who are struggling, who are coping with very difficult situations, but who feel within themselves some impulse, some hope, some expression of what's possible. And I'm dedicating visions of a universal humanity to all those people, wherever they may be. And my prayer is that it will touch your heart, it will touch your spirit, it will touch the life of our whole planet, so that we will use our new powers and our compassion for an ever evolving future for Earth life. One day I was taking a walk in the hills above my home. I'd been doing a lot of reading about the great mystics and spiritual teachers of the past in relationship to a positive future for humanity, but I couldn't quite bring all of my thoughts together. Frustrated, I suddenly stopped and posed a question to the universe. What is humanity's new story that is comparable to the story of the birth and life of Christ that has inspired so many people for the last 2,000 years? With that question, the universe responded. I had an expanded reality experience. I pierced the blue cocoon of Earth as our astronauts had done, and found myself floating weightlessly in space. I had become a universal being, capable of seeing and comprehending humanity's role within the entire cosmic story. In a flash, I was catapulted into the future, and I could see a few frames ahead in the movie of creation. I was aware of myself as a member of planet Earth. I saw that we were running out of energy and gasping for breath. I could feel the pain running through the whole planetary body as people were dying of hunger, being tortured, killing one another. The accumulation of pain became so intense that there was a moment of shared attention, as if some major disaster had impacted the entire Earth's population. This shared feeling of pain opened our hearts. Love poured through our nervous systems. We experienced mass resonance, a higher harmonic of consciousness. A chain reaction of pent-up love, created by the illusion of separation, was ignited. It could not be stopped. Then a vibrational tone was heard throughout the planet. With that, the airs cleared, the waters became pristine again. As the mass resonance increased, the systems of our social body seemed to join together as never before. I felt every basic social system shift simultaneously as innovations and breakthroughs connected. Systems of health and education, economics and environment began to coalesce seamlessly by the same powers that orchestrated the creation of the universe. We were being coordinated by that same natural underlying process that joins atom with atom and cell with cell. As the love flowed into our hearts, we began to feel a light emanating from each of us. I knew it was the same light that the mystics speak of. Then I began to feel the light coming toward us from a larger universe. The veil of separation between spirit and human consciousness was thinning, and the light within us and the light beyond us was about to merge. I felt we were just one instant away from shared contact with universal intelligence. And then my inner knowing heard the words, "You are still too young to understand the language of the light." Then I tumbled back to the spiral of evolution. I ascended through the whole story of creation, realizing that the atoms, molecules, cells, and organs of our bodies that were all formed during the process of creation are alive in us now. Then I heard the words, "Our story is the birth of a new humanity. We are all members of one living planetary body, the offspring of a greater cosmic intelligence, predestined to explore the further reaches of our infinite universe." At that moment, I understood what Christ and all the other great beings who came to earth foreshadowed, that humanity is giving birth to a more evolved version of itself. My question was answered. The new story was revealed. My life was never the same again. That was 40 years ago, and it awoke in me the impulse to discover how this possibility might actually be true. And we know that without vision, people perish. And we also know that with vision, we flourish, we grow, we are attracted, we reach toward it. So I began to research, what do we know that makes it possible for us to be connected as one body, to be born towards our next stage of evolution? And I've invited some of the great visionaries of our time that I have found over these 40 years to help us see the truth, the realistic possibilities of us becoming a co-creative universal humanity. In visions, we're going to piece together the new story, the new vision, and we're going to go where humans have never gone before. A meme is an idea that when you have it in your head, makes you act, and you create a culture. You create your world. You create your society by the ideas that you hold in your head. Just as each of us has a genetic code in every cell in our body that makes us unique, So every culture has a mimetic code that when it believes it, it acts on it. In the 20th century, we had some of the most terrible memes of human history. We had Nazism, we had communism, we had mutually assured destruction as a mode of security. And it's really fascinating to notice that, for example, in Nazism, when the Nazis were defeated, it's very hard for the German people to even imagine that they believed in such a way that they could kill 6 million Jews and more. That was a belief system. When it was gone, it's hard to believe it. Communism, millions and millions of people were in a totalitarian system, many of them imprisoned and many of them killed. When we went to the Soviet Union right after Perestroika and Glasnost, the people who a few years before had said communism was the best system told you, we always knew it didn't work. And the communist mimetic code disappeared and the culture was left without a meme. And when you're left without a good mimetic code, regressive ideas come in, violent ideas. So the mimetic codes of the 20th century have collapsed in most cases. However, the mimetic codes of the 21st century, where we are now, are fading rapidly. Let's think for a moment of biblical literalism. The idea that my God is better than your God, that idea, that meme is causing violence and destruction, and among many of us, it's fading. The idea of an accidental universe, a materialistic universe, mindless, purposeless, directionless, is also fading for many cosmologists who are noticing the extraordinary fine-tuning and design of this universe. There's a new search for the patterning, the process, that makes it seem as though the accidental, random behavior could not explain the full ordering capacity of the universe.
Evolution is not random, as we have perceived. But evolution has pattern. With pattern, you can see where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. If the world is based on randomness, then I just say it's an accident. I have no idea why it happened. The reality is that there are patterns. And if you read the patterns, then we can promote our evolution rather than fight our evolution.
Another meme that's fading is that technological progress with the exact kind of technology we have today will lead to ever increasing progress. We can see with the explosion of the atomic bombs, with the environmental crisis, that actually more and more technology of the same could actually destroy us. And then we all put our faith in global capitalism. Many of us felt that that would lead to the well-being of humanity. But here we have poverty, we have environmental collapse through unrestrained economic and unfair, unjust growth. That meme is going. The meme of liberal democracy, even though it is the best structure that humans have yet devised, many of us think, it has shown its flaws because it's oppositional, it doesn't lead to integration of the whole, and it doesn't give us an idea of how to move forward together. We're facing a mimetic gap. To cross a mimetic gap, we can think of how do we get from here, the current set of global crises, to there, which is an intuition that we have of a society that could be cooperative, could be sustainable, could be compassionate, and could use the enormous innovation, creativity, and technologies of humanity for a purpose that's attractive, that would pull us forward. Since memes create action, which creates culture, the identification of emerging memes that are just now scattered throughout our culture will be something that we can use to jump the gap.
Every culture has had a cosmological vision at its center, which serves a kind of magnetic function of pulling us toward the future, helping us imagine the future we would like to see unfold. It's in every culture. It has been since the beginning of time. And I think the challenge for us in these early days of the 21st century is to essentially embrace the technological revolution that we see all around us, to see where it might be leading, and then to try to get ahead of the curve in terms of creating a mimetic attractor, if you will, a cultural attractor that will draw us in a benign direction and essentially summon up the better angels of our nature and help us to cross over what I think will be an enormously challenging threshold.
We are entering the first stage of conscious evolution. What is conscious evolution? It's the evolution of evolution itself, of that 14 billion year continuum, from unconscious to conscious choice. One thing we learn from lessons of evolution is that evolution creates radical newness, from pre-life to life, from animal to human, from human to what's ever coming. We learn to expect these transformations because nature has been doing it for billions of years. And you see us going around our turn in the spiral, you realize it's natural that there's a vision of the next turn. But we haven't seen it yet. We are partners in the biggest drama that has ever been. But it does take that form of awakening that is not simply a mystical experience, although I think that the mystical experience allows for evolutionary catalysts. But to be able to sustain it, I think we'd really have to first have the vision. The consciousness that created the problem cannot be the same consciousness that solves it. But it's not a question of an incremental growth in consciousness. I don't see that ever happening. It literally is a series of jumps, as occurred also in the evolutionary record. We make a jump to being essentially a new kind of species, and we look back upon ourselves of just a few years past as honored Neanderthals.
I think we will continue to see humanity as as Aurobindo talked about, we're a transitory species, that we, in fact, there's this great cartoon that I've seen where you've got this stair step and you've got more primitive life forms, more complex, and then there's a kind of a primate who speaks to this human, this man who's in a suit jacket, and he's looking pensively up at the other empty steps. And the primate says, I was wondering when you were going to notice there's more steps.
For billions of years, entities have been evolving. Most species that ever existed are already extinct, even before man got here. But the creatures evolved in those situations did not know that their behavior could either lead to their extinction or to their transformation. We are the first generation in the history of this planet, as far as we know, who are aware that we're affecting our own evolution by everything we do. The babies we have, the cars we drive, the food we eat, the wars we fight. We're aware that we are affecting that evolution, and we're affecting it very quickly. One of the reasons for modern pessimism that's very understandable is that it looks like those problems are escalating so rapidly, and the solutions seem to be going too slowly. We have to very quickly stop overpopulating, polluting, fighting with weapons of mass destruction, destroying other species, and we have a very, very short time frame in which to do that.
We are distorting the environment, and there's a profound lesson here for us, because it says when you understand the true nature of evolution, that organisms evolve to fit an environment, and that we evolved as fitting an environment that once existed. However, through our actions and our unawareness of what we're doing, we are destroying the environment that actually gave rise to us. this brings a truth home, and it says, yes, we are impacting this planet, and what is the consequence of this impact? And the answer is looming in front of us, is extinction.
This universal humanity that we're barely becoming might actually be dying. It's easy to see what's dying, but it's not easy to see what's emerging, what's being born now. So the crisis of our birth looks to me to be natural at a planetary scale, just like the crisis of birth of a baby is natural. The baby is literally outgrowing its womb. If it stays there, it will die.
Imagine a child in a woman's womb, developing and everything. And imagine that you were a camera in that womb and you're interacting with this child, you're seeing its development, you're seeing it grow and all this. And all of a sudden, there's this day where all of a sudden there's this great disruptive waveform going through and everything is contracting and all this stuff, and all of a sudden the waters disappear, and next thing you know is a little white light appears and the child disappears through this tunnel into the white light. You as the camera inside the womb would experience that as the death of that being, the end of that life. On the other side, however, the doctor, the father, receives the life as the newborn. In one side of the event horizon, one side looks at it as tremendous fear and loss, and the other side as tremendous gift and life. And so we are in that transition. We have the choice to look at this transition that we're in as this terrifying, destructive moment where the possibility of everything dying is present, or as the possibility of this life emerging for society, for the humankind as a whole. And to see that birth, to see that life evolving into this newborn state where it just becomes just a little bit aware of a larger perspective outside the womb, the galactic perspective, outside the womb of the earth, outside the incubator. That is the possibility that's opening to us at this time.
If we take the metaphor that Earth is giving birth to a universal species, where would we be in that process? My own diagnosis as a planetary midwife, if I could call myself that, would be to take the overview perspective like the astronauts did, to see ourselves here on Earth, to recognize that in the 60s we literally did get outside the biosphere. We did see ourselves as one living body. And what we've been doing in the last 40 years is we have been suddenly learning we had to struggle to coordinate ourselves as one body, and that we realized we had no experience in how to do this. We had no institutions who know how to do it.
We are 9-month babies that come to term, and you find ways of bringing it out. When you bring forth this new birth, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Where is it going? We have a sufficiency because of the harvest of the spiritual technologies, the spiritual understandings of so many peoples and things, never possible before our time. We know what some of these things are. The scientists are trying to prove, oh, it's all different kind of whoop, whoop, whoop structures in the brain. But when you bring it all together, we have the means for evolutionary evolvement.
This idea that we are the universe, after some 14 billion years of unbroken evolution, now becoming aware of itself, now becoming conscious of itself, that whether we choose to use spirit language to describe that or whether we choose to use more scientific language, both are legitimate. But there's a distinction that I make between day and night language or day and night experience. That we all have our day experience, what we normally talk to each other about during the daytime. We also have our night experience, and we fly in our dreams. We do all kinds of interesting things in our dreams. And yet we distinguish those two. I mean, if you asked me what I did for lunch today, and I said I turned myself into a crow and I flew over to the neighborhood farm and goofed around with the cows for a little bit and came back and got a Dairy Queen milkshake, and now here I am, you'd think this is a little weird, or you know. But if you said, Michael, have you had any interesting dreams lately? And I told you the same thing, you wouldn't bat an eye. And so religious language is what I call night language. That is, it speaks metaphorically or poetically about the nature of reality. And uses language like spirit and God or gods and angels and demons. I mean, different traditions, of course, use different kind of language. Science tends to use what I call day language, that is measurable, scientific, testable language. And I think one of the challenges is that if we don't make a distinction between day and night language, we need to have both, because of course night language is the meaningful side. That's where we get our sense of meaning and our role in it. One of the most interesting things when we look at an evolutionary perspective through sacred eyes or through meaningful lenses, you know, where we actually choose to see the patterns in ways that can enrich our lives, is that crisis, I mean, the universe, we don't have a universe where it's all just a put on a smile, happy, friendly, you know, there's chaos, there's destruction, there's breakdown, there's violence, there's extinctions. You can't have a universe without that. The death of stars, this cataclysmic explosion of stars in red giants and supernova explosions, there would be no planets, there would be no life. If it weren't for the death of the dinosaurs, a great catastrophe, the mammals wouldn't flourish. And so what we see consistently throughout the whole evolutionary process is chaos, breakdowns, and destruction fueling the creative process. It's almost like God or the goddess or the universe or evolution or whatever you want to call this creative process seems to delight in taking bad news and turning it into new creative possibilities.
So conscious evolution holds the promise of the evolution of our species. And we are the very first generation to face this. The human species has no experience with this degree of power, because what's happened in our generation is that the collective capacity, which we could call the noosphere, the thinking layer of Earth, which is our mind sphere, our cultures, our technologies, our systems, has turned into a vast super organism of power.
Here we are at an instant in the history of life where there is a fundamental transition going on. It is every bit as significant as when single cells join together to form a multicellular organism. And we're here, we get to watch it. And not only do we get to see it, but it's happening in a very condensed moment in time. This isn't happening over 10 million years. This is happening over hundreds of years, over decades. We can see the change. So we get to see this. And not only are we just observing this, but we're the architects of this change. We're the vehicles for this transition between two levels of organizational complexity, the birth of this superorganism.
And then at the growing edge, conscious evolution is scientific and technological. Genetics, robotics, nanotechnology, the space program. And as our scientists penetrate into matter and find this awesome process of creation, we are also gaining the technologies of radical power.
The new technologies that are brought forth by this change, by this need to transcend our current state of affairs, is a technology that is hard to imagine at this time. Just like, you know, our forefathers, when they were going around in horse and carriage, had a hard time imagining that in a fairly short amount of time, maybe in 100 years, we would be flying around the whole world, going to the moon, and so on. Right now, this change that's occurring is pushing us to a quantum level in our evolution in technology, and maybe into a technology that's based on principles that are completely different than the current principles that we use. which is mostly fire technology. Our technology is based on burning fuels, exploding things, and so on. And we haven't really discovered the source of the fire. How does the fire come to be? How does the fuel get compressed to have all this energy available, all this energy potential in it so that we can burn it afterward? What is the source of that energy? And that, I think, is where we're going, and we're going there very rapidly. And I call it vacuum engineering. It's learning to use the vacuum energy, learning to use the source of creation instead of using the creation after it has been already manipulated by nature, by biology. So it's tapping directly into the source of the energy potential of the universe.
At exactly the same moment, that same technology, which would allow us to destroy the entire species, slightly modified, becomes the technology that allows us to take that species beyond the planet and expand the species. Coincidence? I think not. There's something going on there. You know, I don't know if there's a greater hand working here, moving us along. I don't know if it's because we are starting to drive our own evolution in our own direction. I don't know how that works, but it's amazing.
When I got into science about 50 years ago, there were two possible futures which looked extremely promising. I mean, one was biology in the strict sense, living creatures as they exist. The other was self-reproducing machines. So those two things were on the horizon, so to speak, 50 years ago, and it was like a horse race. I was sort of interested in betting on them, and I wrote some pieces then about self-reproducing machines, thinking that that might be the wave of the future, and the biology was then going rather slowly. But in the meantime, in the last 50 years, it's no longer a horse race. In fact, biology has gone ahead at tremendous speed and with tremendous momentum, whereas self-reproducing machines have really stood still. They have made very little progress in 50 years, and they've made some progress, but it's really pitifully slow compared with biology. And if you look at what a self-reproducing machine really has to do in detail and the different components it has to have, it's clear it has to have essentially the same components that a living cell has, which have naturally evolved. And so when you actually consider the practical limitations on what a self-reproducing machine can be, what sort of materials you can build it out of, how it eats, how it supplies itself with new components and so forth, it ends up that what you have, if you want a self-reproducing machine, you really have to reinvent a bug. That's essentially what it is. You have to reinvent an artificial living creature. But all the basic inventions are already there, and they're what we call biology. So I don't believe that the self-reproducing machines are really going to be a threat or are going to outpace biology. I think that race was already lost. So as I see it, what's actually happening is that biology is going ahead very fast. Computers, of course, are also going ahead, but computers are not self-reproducing. And it's very hard to imagine them being self-reproducing unless they become biological. And of course, there can be a fusion of computer technology with biology, but it will be essentially biological because biology has all the basic tools that you need. So I don't see this so much as a threat to human beings. It's rather an opportunity for human beings to enhance our capabilities.
I think that the biology is actually the ultimate computer. It is the ultimate advanced technology, and that computers will never be able to supersede this. But I believe that we can definitely make technology that enhance the biology, that enhance the capacity of our biological structure to interact with the vacuum energy, so that we can, for instance, get the biology to live for 1,000 years instead of 100 years.
And there's a new part of biology called synthetic biology, which is in fact already flourishing, which is we're just learning how to program genomes so as to produce the kind of results that we have in mind. If we had trees that we could construct or design which use sunlight 10 times more efficiently than natural trees, that's certainly allowed within the laws of physics and chemistry. So in every country in the tropics, at least, where there's plenty of sunlight, would be self-sufficient in fuel. And I mean, that would be an enormous revolution.
One of the interesting things that happens when you start talking about human settlement of space is all the traditional discussions start to fall apart. Up until now, the expansion of human civilization, you could reasonably say, has been characterized by an ongoing attack on the rest of the natural world. The expansion of human technology has been characterized by pushing back what you might call, if you were looking at it from a separatist point of view, the natural biosphere. Cities expand, natural preserves shrink. That's the way it's been working in this closed system as human technology and civilization has expanded. When you break out of the Earth and you move out into the solar system, it completely reverses. What happens then is the expansion of human technology and civilization brings along with it the biosphere. So I can't even have this discussion with people who say, oh, we've screwed up the Earth, now we're going to go screw up space. No. Human beings are going to go to the moon and plant trees. Human beings are going to go to Mars, and there will be, we're going to grow things. We're going to green things. We're going to carry life with us for the first time. So, as is the case when you hit any moment of cultural or philosophical revolution, the discussion that was happening the day before doesn't make sense the day after. There were people right before the Copernican revolution who would have a certain kind of discussion vis-a-vis the Earth being the center of the solar system, and all discussions and debates coming out of that. Can't have that discussion the day after when you realize that the sun is the center of the solar system. There are some people who see what's happening now in their own mind as somehow the end of days, that, oh, we've done it all, time is over. But if you think about it, we're just starting. We haven't even begun the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. It is all starting right now. And there's no reason to be defeatist. You should be completely optimistic about what's possible.
Now, it's very interesting and encouraging that exactly at this period of history, we're experiencing the rise of the feminine co-creator. We have been in a very masculine project for a long time. I mean, the masculinization of
our religions, masculinization of God, of culture, it's unmistakable. But I don't think it's been a mistake. It's been a harsh lesson, and it's been very expensive. But I don't think it's a mistake, and therefore I don't think it's to be undone. But it does need to go forward. I really do believe that the future of the human race lies in women. Men left to their own devices have not done that good a job on the entire planet. And it's only when both halves of life come together in their totality that we have a chance of mustering the resources going to take us where we need to be. Half the talent of the human race, undervalued and underused. We can't get there without all of our talent, all of the resources. And there are certain things that women seem to be more naturally attuned to, certain truths, that their existence, their bodies, their role as life givers, those are truths that are very important to the human race right now, and they're very important for men to open and accept and integrate.
A woman imbued by the creative process within herself, who's desirous not only of giving birth to children, but giving birth to the authentic feminine self.
And I see things happening that most people are not writing about. I said the most important thing is the rise of women to full partnership with men in the whole domain of human affairs, which may very well be the most important event of the last 5,000 years. Because with women, the emphasis is more often on process rather than on product, on making things cohere and develop and grow, where inner space is as important as outer space.
So in our new mimetic code, the rise of the feminine co-creator, of women all over the world arising now into their creative role, seeking greater partnership with men willing to co-create with them rather than dominate and control, are carrying the code for the evolution of culture itself. I believe we're seeing here in the rise of the feminine, and particularly the evolutionary woman, a bio-evolutionary event, not just a cultural change.
And I see women of a certain age in the world everywhere with passion and purpose and immense courage that sometimes gets them killed, quite frankly. But they are there pursuing the enhancement of their society, of their family, of their region, everywhere. You know, this is an enormous shift.
So let's place in our thoughts here that as the feminine co-creator rises and joins with the evolutionary man willing to partner and co-create with her, that what we're giving birth to here, along with chosen children, really is a new world. For me, this is a myth that's called forth by conscious evolution. It's the myth of the birth of the universal human and the universal humanity through the joining together of men and women and people everywhere on this earth with a vision that is so unknown, and yet, because of our great spiritual traditions, we have always known that we are more than creature humans to eat, sleep, reproduce, and die. And what we might find is that to take the next step of evolution, it's not a matter of dying to transform, but evolving.
How do we experience
Conscious evolution, because we actually are evolution. Here we are, the universe in person. We may not remember it all consciously, but we are a composite resume of everything that came before us. So when we experience that evolution is becoming conscious in us and that we are capable of affecting it for better or for worse, how do we feel this? It starts out by feeling it spiritually or deep within ourself. And that spiritual impulse is an impulse of love. It's an impulse to connect. It's an impulse to feel empathetic and related. It's an impulse that makes you want to grow and express yourself in alignment with whatever you understand to be the higher power.
You can call that God, only it's a different kind of God from the one that's in the Bible, because this God is one that's inside the universe rather than outside.
So many people have seen this time in history from so many different perspectives. People who love humanity, people who love the cosmos, have thought deeply, spent deep time with this larger process. And there's a certain pattern that they're all seeing very similar things. To me, the two signal features of this emerging human are an awakened mind and an open heart. A mind that knows more, sees more, understands more, receives more, and a heart that's just expansive, the heart that feels the profound empathy that links the entire world. We're in the process of giving birth to humanity that's never been seen before, of extraordinary intellectual powers, extraordinary powers of compassion. And as we become more coherent on the planet, as we become more integrated socially, politically, economically, as we kind of remove the scars of discord and division, as that happens, the collective psyche becomes less divided. The collective psyche becomes whole. It's just as the integrated individual is a more creative individual. Likewise, when the species becomes integrated, then we will become more transparent to the infusion of knowledge from the universe through the collective psyche into our individual psyche. That will be experienced as, I think, a collective waking up, a shift in our common sense.
When I started out in my career, I actually was not spiritual and went into science looking for all the answers, and then started looking at the nature of cells through my graduate and through my professional career in universities, looking at the mechanisms of how cells worked. And interestingly enough, found some information that was directly contrary to what I was teaching. It revealed that the fate of the cells wasn't determined by the genes, but was more determined by the environment in which the cells found themselves. And so in trying to understand how was the environment talking to the genes, I spent about 10 or 15 years looking at the structure and mechanisms and physiology of the cell, trying to interpret how information from the environment was translated into information of the genes, and came across the reality that the brain of the cell was not the genes and the nucleus as the facts that I was teaching, but that the brain of the cell was actually the skin or the membrane of the cell. And it acted in a sense very much, not analogous, but homologous, in the same mechanism as a computer chip. Well, at that moment of understanding it, and it was fun because I was typing on my computer, putting this data in, and all of a sudden I realized that the cell was like the computer. And then it hit me that the programmer is not inside the computer. That the programmer, like myself, was the thing that was typing on the surface of the keyboard. And this very moment, it just my life all of a sudden stopped, and there was this whole change in my physiology. And all of a sudden I realized with a surety that I wasn't inside my cells, that I was an identity out in the field, that I owned the nature of spirituality and of God and the matrix as a scientist, not as a believer who wanted to believe. I didn't even believe in it. But the wonderful part about the epiphany was that the moment it hit, I had this tremendous heart surge. I call it a heart orgasm because it was so much joy coming out of my chest that tears were coming down my eyes. And I realized for the first 40 years of my life, I lived in my head. And I thought of everything neurologically, cerebrally, connecting dots and pictures and making sense. But when the truth came in, it bypassed my head and hit me in my heart. And my life changed because I realized I had not touched this part of my life, being so cerebral. And that this heart gave me the fullest connection, because it was not the heart of just myself. It was my heart and the heart of the world and the heart of my cells and the heart of the community, that all of a sudden I saw the oneness of it all, transcending the limitations of my cerebral knowledge and acquiring this greater feeling. Now, that was an experience that once you touch that kind of experience, you can't deny it. That's a big issue. But what was really wonderful about it was an education experience for me, because I started to realize that when I started to use my intelligence to live in harmony with the universe that I saw at that moment, the more I touched that, the more my heart was generating my experiences on this planet. And all of a sudden, I understood the nature of love, not just the love between two people, the love between myself and this beautiful planet, the love between the people all around who don't see their own love, the love of a universe and the beauty of, I mean, as a biologist, I've always been involved with life, but always through like a microscope. All of a sudden it was now, I was in the Petri plate. And it's been a greatest joy of my entire life. And if I could get people to understand this new science so they could touch this, I get very excited by that possibility and opportunity, because I realize once we do this as a group, then the unity of us as humanity, of us as a living element of an entire planet, as us as a living element in a universe, becomes a wholeness that we've lost in the period of being fractured.
If we look at the developmental process on the whole universal scale, and we know our own spiral, which is only one out of trillions, we could see we developed from no thing at all through energy, matter, life, ever more complex life, human life, conscious co-creation. We can see that Earth itself is part of a developmental sequence. The thought here that some physicists are now coming up with is that underlying the extraordinary order and developmental process of universal evolution, there is what they call a cosmic code. And the nature of this cosmic code that informs all existence, according to this meme, is create more conscious life. And the way the cosmic code is felt in us as our own desire for more creative life. In other words, that's not just a personal whim. It's not just a mystical yearning. It's the code of conscious evolution throughout the universe, now becoming ever more self-aware in us. And that takes me to the evolution of the universe itself. The universe is coming alive with ever increased intelligence.
I think the best answer that I have come up with to this challenge is to embrace the notion that we all inhabit an intelligent universe, that we are all collectively engaged in a mission of transforming the cosmos from lifeless dust, from lifeless atoms, into vibrant, intelligent life.
And what is fascinating to me about this is that the 14 billion years that we understand it has taken to create a universe and at least one planet with intelligent life, to the degree that we are intelligent, there are billions of more years in front of us. The universe itself is young. Not only is universal humanity young on planet Earth, but the whole unfolding potential of the universe, not fully understood, is way longer than has already existed. And there are those who believe that through the development of intelligent humans and the whole noosphere and collective intelligence that's just forming now, that we have a role as emissaries of life, emissaries of the cosmic code, in a universe literally that is unfolding potentially to life ever evolving. And there are those who surmise statistically that with the trillions of planetary systems throughout the entire universe, it's possible that there are other wombs for life out there. We haven't met any yet. My own intuition is that we won't have a shared experience of whatever else is out there until we ourselves mature beyond our separated, aggressive, mentally challenged condition of a very scared newborn species.
I do believe there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, and I think it's simply unlikely to the point of absurdity that it would have arisen only once in an out-of-the-way planet in an ordinary galaxy. That's very counterintuitive to me. The universe may be pervaded with a form of intelligence that's simply beyond our capability to currently perceive. It's a little bit like, think of a prairie dog colony alongside an interstate freeway. Now those little prairie dogs know something's happening. They can hear some sound and wind rushing, but I would suggest impossible for them to connect that with the technological civilization of which that freeway is a part. Another example that is given is that can we reasonably assume that it's even possible that a colony of mountain gorillas would realize that they exist in a world pervaded by the internet, jet aircraft, etc.? Probably not. And the same could be true of us. It could be all around us, but simply invisible to us.
How would society possibly catch a glimpse of what's working? How would every one of us know that what we're doing, what we're dreaming, what we're attempting is part of this vast, evolving whole? The best way that I've thought of seeing it is a wheel of co-creation. And think of it as a matrix of what's emerging in our turn on the spiral. So here's a sector of our social body called health. Here's a sector called education, a sector called environment, a sector called government, and so on. And you just imagine the innovations and creative solutions that now exist in every sector of that wheel, with one more degree of connectivity, one more degree of synergy, one more degree of the way nature takes jumps through bringing separate parts together to create a greater whole, one more degree of doing what's natural at times of quantum shifts. And you could see that we could far more quickly than we imagined have the emergence of a cooperative and creative system that could utilize the enormity of our capacities and our global intelligence in time to jump the gap.
Having a model like this wheel helps people visualize how it's all connected and all the different disciplines are connected with each other. Because right now, one of the points that Thomas Berry makes is that the universities don't teach the universe. You've got all these different isolated disciplines that really don't have a lot of connection to each other. So the brilliance of each of them is not able to feed in any synergistic way each other. And I think that's what this wheel helps people visualize, is a way of recognizing that yes, there's all of these different disparate disciplines, but that they're interrelated, and that as we establish means of communication and cross-fertilization between them, whole new possibilities open up that we couldn't have even imagined before.
The wheel is a symbol of the integration and synergizing of what's working locally, regionally, nationally, and globally that we could do in the next 5 to 10 years through internet and networking, the social networks of positive change, to discover that there is already a new world being born in our midst. It's not visible to the existing institutional structures. It's not visible to the media, but it is visible if you have evolutionary eyes. It is visible if you understand the new beams that are arising of the evolution of evolution, of the evolution of the person, of the evolution of humanity, pulling together all these capacities.
As we move into the 20th century, 21st century, people are going to get afraid. People are going to be frightened, the way we're always frightened with loss. And there will be a tremendous temptation to contract inside the ideologies of the past, to contract inside religion as it used to be, inside nationalism as it used to be, inside my family, inside a narrow sense of self. And that's something I think we have to resist. We have to recognize that in that way lies destruction. If it's going to be a time that's going to call for great courage, it will really require not only wisdom, but courage. We have to look into a future that works for the planet.
I look at the crises of our time, the difficulties, the challenges. I mean, any species makes change only because it's forced to, typically. And the same is true of our own lives. I mean, I've never woke up some Thursday morning and just decided to make an enormous change for no good reason. Usually something, forces me to do that. So I trust chaos, breakdowns, and bad news as much as I trust anything.
Well, I'm often asked why, in the face of this host of tragedies that confronts us, why I am an optimist, and I am an optimist, and I like to remember the wonderful phrase of Martin Luther King when he said, "The arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And I would add that the arc of the universe is long. It bends not only toward justice, but toward cooperation, toward interdependence, and toward an embrace of the future. The signs I see that give me hope that we are in fact moving toward cooperation are first a sense of spiritual awakening and curiosity that I think you can witness everywhere. People really are beginning to ask, why on earth are we behaving this way toward one another? The second is a kind of dawning, an emergence of almost a collective consciousness, an awareness of our existence as a, if you will, a superorganism, humanity at large. I think the very depth of the crisis that confronts us may well be, and hopefully will be, the catalyst that provokes the next stage in cultural evolution. I think that it's wonderful to hope that it's, as Hemingway once said, isn't it pretty to think so? It really requires is for those of us that may have that vision to roll up our sleeves and start working as hard and fast as we can to make that transition a reality.
The concept for me personally, what conscious evolution means is that with our own ability of our own awareness and our own processing, that we can employ our consciousness to support our survival and our evolution. And that we're not just victims of genes doing whatever they do in some genetic gamble. We are participants in this process. So it says that, yes, it doesn't look good right now, but I can participate along with everybody else and create something far better than we have on this planet. But I have to do it with an awareness. I am not going to stumble into my future. I have to be guiding myself through this future. So it says, as we become more conscious, then we become more empowered to run our biology than to be the backseat passenger, which most people see their lives. They see themselves in the backseat in the vehicle going out of control, when the reality is, no, that was your choice. You have a conscious option to get back in the front seat and put your hands on the wheel and drive the vehicle. And this is where we have to go, from the backseat victim to the front seat driver.
Nothing happens until you decide. It is the decision that drives all else. And once you purely decide something and put all of your will into that, you can make things happen. It is indeed the concept of conscious evolution. I choose this future.
When we ask the question, what's next? What can I do? What can I do? 1,000 people will give 1,000 different answers to that question. Thank God, because there's 1,000 different tasks to be done. And the task that's ours is somewhat semi-unique to us. And there's a spot, there's a niche that's just waiting for us to step into. But all of those different tasks, the question is, how do we find them? How do we find that niche? How do we find what it is? And I think it requires interrupting ourselves, interrupting our patterns, tuning within, tuning very, very deeply within, tuning within until we settle into that place which is our deepest experience of ourselves, our deepest experience of our life. Out of that space comes an awareness, comes a sense of what's the next challenge. And it may seem small, it may feel small, but there's an unmistakable feeling that comes when one says, this is what I need to do. It's not what somebody else needs to do, but it's what I need to do. Right here, right now, this week, this month, this is what I need to do. And that will always lead somewhere. That will always, and it will always lead you to other people who are finding their own heart into that place, because fundamentally, all of us are individual manifestations of this larger, coherent, self-aware intelligence. And then I think Gandhi had it right. We must become what is needed. We must do it ourselves. Well, even though it's a small piece, whatever that piece that is ours to do, we do it. When we do that, we align ourselves with a larger creative process. When we do that, then we become part of the solution. Then we become tomorrow.
I think I'm very confident that when those future humans, that our offspring, whatever amalgams of biology and technology they may be, whatever consciousness they have, they look back at this moment, they will see it as this extraordinary instant in the history of life. This moment when the nature of their society, of the nature of themselves, the nature of their future was laid down. It will be, oh, to have been alive at that instant in time. And all the things that people fret about and worry about, trashing the planet or doing this and that, there may be trauma. They'll forget all that thing. That stuff. We always forget about the traumas of the past. What we're interested in is our own story. And what is important is the positive, amazing things that are occurring today.
If there's a heaven, I really feel it is here and right now and under our feet, in that heaven is a place of creation. The joy, happiness, and beauty of this planet that we have lost, and bring it back and make it our own. The joy of life is phenomenal, and even though I'm a biologist and involved with life, it goes beyond that. That this is indeed a garden worthy of celebrating, and this is what is our future.
We are at the cusp, we are at the turning point, the very moment in the history of the universe, as far as I can see, where life itself began to become the moving force of the universe by expanding beyond this one tiny speck and moving out into that universe, by choosing consciously to move from its birthplace, from its cradle, out into what is out there, and making of that a new domain for life, and sentience, and joy, and excitement, and love.
If I could talk to all of humanity, if I could talk to everyone out there, I would say to them at this time in history, take the time in your daily routine, take the time to connect with your essence, expand your consciousness, open up beyond the earth, beyond the solar system, realize your place in the universe and connect with it.
You know, there's a famous Spanish saying that really epitomizes to me the nature and magnitude of the choice that faces us. And it is a statement about our responsibility as a species. It's a wonderfully succinct way of summing up the challenge that we face. And the statement has to do with our own responsibility to take responsibility for the future of the cosmos. And the Spanish proverb says this: traveler, there are no roads. Roads are made by walking.
Nobody has seen what will be 2,000 years from now. If we survive this, it's greater than anything that was ever possible for any of the great beings of the past. Is this idealistic? Is evolution idealistic? Is it idealistic that it got from subatomic particles to us here? It's certainly improbable. But is it idealistic? If nature got from that original flaring forest to all of these trillions of
galactic systems and us standing here being conscious of ourselves as part of that and saying we see that we're being born towards a phase of universal evolution, is that idealistic? Or is that simply natural, obvious, reasonable, and attractive? By putting all the means together and identifying what's working and what can work, we can begin to realize the code of evolution that is alive in us. I think we'll find that we're so extraordinarily excited about what we can become that no force of destruction will be anywhere near as interesting as the force of evolution. 40 years ago, we were too young to understand the language of the light, the language of universal intelligence, the language of conscious evolution. But now, minute by minute and day by day, we're getting closer and closer to the actual experience of our birth as a universal humanity. So let us take our rightful place as emissaries of light as we move forward on this earth, within our solar system, and ultimately the universe beyond.